In this video, let's look at some investing mistakes that Canadians are making. Honestly, a lot of these mistakes are made by investors all around the world, but since I'm in Canada, let's look at it from a Canadian point of view. By the way, if you're a returning viewer, thank you for watching and supporting the channel. You can help me out a bit more by commenting below what kind of videos you would like to watch more of. I can talk more about markets or charts or even Bitcoin and crypto if that's what you prefer. Just drop a comment below and let me know. And if you're new here, welcome and hope you like the video. Let's begin. So let's get to it. What are the mistakes that Canadians are making? Starting with the first one, a very obvious one, that is not investing. So of course, the biggest mistake you can make in investing is to not invest at all. You might have heard it a million times already. You have to start investing and you have to start early to take advantage of compounding. But it's a fact of life. The earlier you start, the more time your money has to grow through compound interest. Now I understand it can be quite scary to start investing in the first place, but you have to do it. It just takes a little bit of effort and a little bit of learning to start doing it. When it comes to first time investors, there's also this matter of I'm going to start investing when I find the right opportunity. But trust me, it's never going to be the right opportunity. You have to start as soon as possible and learn through the process. Even I waited a long time to start investing at the right time, but there was no right time. I had to start and learn the process over a period of time. Not investing can also be applied to other people. Some people start investing and then kind of just stop doing it for some reason. Some people only invest when they have some surplus money and don't do it consistently. Did you know that over 50% of Canadians are not investing each year? This is a staggering amount of people who are not investing and losing out on building wealth over the course of their life. Of course, since it's Canada, there's a lot of people who move here and don't invest immediately. They wait it out, they kind of get accustomed to everything and keep deprioritizing investing. But please don't do that. And trust me, the only thing somebody needs to start investing is a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of learning. This brings us to the next mistake, that is there's a lack of investment knowledge among Canadians. There are lots of surveys showing that a lot of Canadians feel that they're unprepared when it comes to things like investing and general money management as well. If you look at some numbers, only 51% of Canadians describe themselves as knowledgeable about investing. 38% of investors don't even know what an ETF means and 42% are unfamiliar with core concepts like dollar cost averaging. But on the bright side, 3 in 4 Canadians express interest in learning more about investing. And this interest is the most important thing. If you're interested in learning anything nowadays, especially about investing, there's a wealth of knowledge out there. There are plenty of resources on YouTube and even on government sites. You should not be wasting any time. Take the first few steps to learn and start investing as soon as possible. If it was up to me, I would give you a very simple 5-step process. The first is to understand how much money you have to start investing. The second is to learn a little bit more about the markets you want to invest in, mainly the Canadian and the US market. The third is to understand the returns of these markets so you can understand which ones you want to invest in. The fourth one is to choose some ETFs that you can invest in, such as VFV. And the fifth one is to start investing and do it consistently. For an average person, these 5 steps are actually good enough to actually become a millionaire. Most people who become millionaires actually do it this way. You might not believe me, but the stats are out there. Most of the people are actually becoming rich this way. Not all of us are going to start businesses or inherit a lot of money. If you want to become wealthy or rich, this is the way to go. Just start learning and start doing as soon as possible. Talking about indices actually brings us to the next mistake, that is there's a lack of diversification among Canadian investors. For some reason, even though Canada is neighbors with the US, a lot of people have a big home bias when it comes to investing. They're basically concentrating their portfolios too heavily in domestic stocks. Here are some things to know. Firstly, the Canadian stock market represents only 3% of global market capitalization, while on the other hand, the US stock market is about 40 to 50% of the global markets. The Canadian markets are heavily weighted towards financials and natural resources, potentially leading to overexposure in these sectors. On the other hand, if you look at something like the US market, it's much more diversified and you have so many more opportunities there. Overall, diversifying internationally, especially in the US market, can provide better risk-adjusted returns. There's no reason for a Canadian to be not investing in the US markets. The more important question is, how much should you be investing? There are many different opinions of experts out there, so feel free to check out some of them and figure out what works best for you. You might find differing opinions, but one thing will be common, that they all recommend that people invest in the US markets as well. Some of them will also recommend investing in emerging markets like India and South America, but that's really up to you. When it comes to diversification, you should also be looking at different asset classes. Maybe emerging asset classes like Bitcoin and crypto also fit your investment thesis. For me, it actually makes sense to be investing more in the US markets. Looking at my age and my goals, I do want more exposure to innovation. We can all agree that Canada has a lot of things, but innovation is not at the forefront right now. If you want exposure to the biggest and most innovative companies in the world, you have to look towards the US. Your Google, Amazon, Tesla, Nvidia, all the best stocks are actually based out of the US. Why miss out on the growth potential of all these companies? But also remember that the Canadian market has actually kept up with the S&P 500 over the last few decades. But generally, it's a better idea to stay as diversified as possible, especially in an ever-changing and fast-moving world. So the first three mistakes, even though we looked at it from a Canadian viewpoint, they are actually quite common. But the next three mistakes are going to be very, very specific to Canadians. Let's start by looking at the improper use of tax-sheltered accounts. Among Canadians, there's a general mismanagement of tax advantage accounts like your TFSAs, RRSPs, and even FHSAs now. There are two specific areas of problems. The first is a general lack of knowledge. Many Canadians are unaware of their contribution limits or the best ways to utilize these accounts. And the second one is over-contribution. Exceeding contribution limits can actually result in penalties, and you should be aware of these things. Now, in this video, we are not going to take a deep dive into these topics. I have actually made several videos about these accounts, and you can check them out whenever you feel like it. In general, you should just know about these accounts and what they should be used for and how much money you can put towards them. There's also one more thing that I want to talk about. When it comes to these accounts, for some reason, Canadians tend to take a very bank-centric approach. Trust me, relying solely on bank offerings may limit investment options and potentially lead to higher fees as well. I use multiple platforms for these accounts because there are different asset classes that I want access to. For example, I would like to invest in stocks, ETFs, gold, and even GICs, and not all can be done from the same platform. And that is why you have to shop around and find the right platform for yourself. Talking about assets actually brings us to the next point, that is a lot of Canadians are holding cash instead of investments in these accounts. There's a common misconception, especially when it comes to beginners, that these accounts are actually meant for just saving and not investing. This could simply be because the word savings appears in all these accounts and it sets the wrong expectation. So even though it's called the tax-free savings account or the first home savings account, these are all investment vehicles that you should be using. For example, holding only cash in a TFSA misses out on potential tax-free investment growth. TFSAs can hold various investments including stocks, bonds, and ETFs. So I want to clarify, there's nothing wrong in holding cash. In fact, cash is an essential component of a good portfolio. But don't just stick to high interest savings account when it comes to TFSAs and your other accounts. Try to do whatever works for your situation, your age, and your investment goals. You also need to figure out a way to take proper advantage of the taxation around these accounts, which brings us to the next mistake, that is a lot of Canadians are ignoring tax consequences. Generally speaking, failing to consider tax implications in these accounts can erode investment returns. Again, if you check out the videos I spoke about before, you'll get a good handle on how taxation works for all of these accounts. But here are two things that you should definitely remember. The first is foreign dividend taxation. When it comes to US stocks held in non-registered accounts or TFSAs and FHSAs, they are subject to 15% withholding tax on dividends. This is something you should never forget, so make sure you're holding the right stocks in the right account. The second one is a more generalized one, that is you need to figure out where your assets should be located. Improper placement of investments across different account types can lead to tax inefficiencies. You also need to figure out what you really want to do with the money in these accounts. What do you do after you grow them? For example, a TFSA is great for short, medium, or long-term goals, but an RRSP is more suitable for long-term goals. When you withdraw money from an RRSP, you will be taxed. However, if you withdraw money from your TFSA, you will not be taxed at all. So you really need to figure out what do you want to invest, when do you want to invest this money, and if you withdraw it, what are you going to do with it? You can also come up with different tax strategies across these accounts. For example, if you're falling short of investing in your RRSP 1 year, you can always withdraw some money from your TFSA and divert that money towards your RRSP. This is a very common strategy used by a lot of people. I've spoken about this in many of my videos where I'm talking about saving taxes. Feel free to check them out as well. But overall, if you just learn how all of these accounts work, you should be fine. The next two mistakes we are going to talk about are more about psychology and the way you take your actions, starting with emotional investing. It's a fact of retail investing that investors often buy high out of greed and sell low out of fear, negatively impacting their returns. In fact, studies show that emotionally driven investing on average can lead to a 4% underperformance. Yes, I know, it's easier said than done. It's very hard to remove your emotions when it comes to investing. You must have heard of this famous saying by Warren Buffett a million times already. Be greedy when others are fearful and be fearful when others are greedy. Except it's very hard to follow. Emotions can take over very quickly. For example, let's say you decide that, hey, I want to buy this stock when the price drops. But when the price drops, your emotions from within and the emotions around you are so negative that it's incredibly hard to take the decision. The only way to set this aside is actually to come up with good investment thesis and stick to it. Stick to the facts. Keep the emotions aside. Keep learning about the company you want to invest in. Keep your points ready on why you want to buy the company. Unless something fundamentally changes, stick to that thesis. It actually takes a lot of practice and a period of time to actually learn these things. You will make a lot of mistakes as you start investing. Emotions are definitely not easy to control. There are a lot of studies actually showing that Canadians do become quite emotional when it comes to investing and lose out on a lot of money. Let's not be one of those people. A very closely related mistake is the next one, that is following investment trends blindly. Ah yes, I know, everybody's favorite. Let's go with the trend. But when it comes to investing, this is something you should not be doing most of the time. To understand this, let's first look at some alarming numbers. Did you know that 53% of Canadian investors use social media for investment information? This is actually up 18% since 2020. When it comes to the younger crowd, 18 to 24, 82% of them are using social media for investment information. The problem with this approach is that the more you look at social media, the more likely you are to come across frauds as well. In fact, 23% of Canadians report encountering possible fraudulent investments. This has also been rising since 2020. So basically, if you rely too much on social media and trends, you're giving way to more risk in your portfolio. The most well-known example of actually following a trend is the GameStop short squeeze that occurred in 2021. Those were some crazy times, but when it comes to things like GameStop and AMC, they are actually backed by nothing. But in fact, your investment should always be backed by facts. Now, I don't want to make blanket statements like all trends are bad. In fact, trends can actually be quite good. For example, look at the AI trend right now. Nvidia has done so well in the last 2 years. But what I'm saying is that if you want to invest in a company like Nvidia, don't do it just because it's trendy. Understand why you are doing it. Understand the trend. Take some time to understand the numbers behind it. See if it makes sense as an investment thesis. See if the numbers behind the company make sense. Do the fundamentals make sense? Do the projections make sense? Understand all of this and then pull the trigger and invest in that company. This is very prevalent in crypto as well. There's so many scams and frauds out there that you have to be very careful. For example, if you wanted to learn more about Bitcoin, there are plenty of resources. If you want to learn more about ETH and Solana, you can find a lot of information as well. But go down this list of thousands and thousands of crypto, you're bound to fall prey to a lot of frauds. It all comes down to the very cliche statement, do your own research before you start investing. So those were some of the investing mistakes I wanted to talk about today. If I had to summarize it in 2 points, it would be start investing and start learning. Then invest a little bit more and then learn a little bit more and then repeat it for the rest of your life. I understand that this is oversimplified and maybe sounds a little boring, but trust me, this is the best way for people like you and me to build wealth. And while we do that, we also have to keep our emotions in check when it comes to investing. On that note, I'll see you next week in a new video. Till then, keep learning and stay on top of your finances. Until next time.